recorded, and it's to make it available for those who might not be able to attend. And also, we will also be providing a downloadable version of this presentation as well for those who might be able to use this after. Now, you will find that this is a webinar, but there is a chat box and a Q&A box. We'd like you to use those features to start to put your questions as we are presenting in the chat box, and Christina and Mira will help us in reading out those questions and so on for us to take them as we proceed through the training. Now, today's goal is to improve the advocacy skill set of patient organizations that are serving the sickle cell community. We also know that we might have some other patient groups from other disease areas also joining us today. And we hope that by participating into this training, you will gain one or two more knowledge that will propel you in the work that you do in the organizations. Without taking much time, I really would like everyone, as we go throughout today, to kindly put where you're joining us from. If you're from Africa, you're from Canada, wherever you're joining us from, put it in the chat box. We love to just, give you a shout out. And at the end of today's session, there will also be a poll. We would like you to complete the poll. It would help us to determine where else and how else we could support you in your advocacy work. And so that will be that part. Quickly, we will go to land acknowledgement, and then I will hand it over to Ms. Rugi Jalloh and then Ms. Cynthia Musunda to introduce themselves before we start today's session. So land acknowledgement, we are grateful for the opportunity to gather, though virtually, on this land. And we thank the generations of indigenous people who have taken care of this land long before other nations groups came. In particular, we acknowledge the traditional territories of the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit, whose territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. We also recognize the contributions of the Métis, Inuit, First Nations, and other indigenous peoples that they have made in shaping and strengthening this province and this country as a whole. We also need to continuously educate ourselves about the colonial history of this country and understand how the wrongdoing of the past still impacts the present and the future. And on this note, I encourage everyone at this training today to continue to actively seek knowledge and take action. Thank you. And on this note, I will introduce, I'll call on Ms. Rugi Jalloh to introduce herself, and we go from there. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Well, good afternoon on my side. It might be evening or morning in other parts of the world. I am really glad to be part of this training. Lanre, Lanre for sure, this SCAGO, we have collaborated many times. I am the president and CEO. Well, it changed actually. I am not only the CEO of the Sickle Cell Disease Association of Atlantic Canada, which includes Nova Scotia, where the association started. I actually live in Nova Scotia. New Brunswick, we have many patients there and families. Newfoundland and PEI. So we have all come together and to form the Sickle Cell Disease Association of Atlantic Canada, which only started at the Sickle Cell Disease Association of Nova Scotia. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you for Ms. Lanre for inviting us to be part of this partnership that we have and collaboration.
Thank you, Ms. Rugi. We have Ms. Cynthia Musunda.
Good morning, everybody. And I just want to ride on the protocols already observed by Ms. Lanre and Ms. Rugi, and just want to, first of all, bring you greetings from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and the province of Saskatchewan. We have a few of our participants across the province. And we are just so glad to be a part of this, to partner with SCAGO and the Sickle Cell Association in the Atlantic Canada. It's always a pleasure to just be able to join in and continue with this cause. I think right from where we started from, we have made some strides, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So this is a great opportunity. I want to thank everybody that has been able to log in and just be a part of this, that at the end of this, we'll be able to walk away to be impactful in our communities. And so we want to thank you to our community of sickle cell patients, their families, advocates, and even those who are not necessarily affected directly by sickle cell. Thank you for your time and what you do for this cause. I hope we all have a good time, and you're welcome to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rugi. We also have another panelist, Beverly Ndoko, who will be joining us shortly. She just had a last-minute appointment that she cannot not do. Ms. Ndoko will be joining us from Manitoba. She's the president founder of the Sickle Cell Circles in Manitoba. On this note, I'd also like to mention that I have with me another board member, Mr. Tunji-Ajayi. If you want to just say a quick hello to everyone, and then we'll go from here.
Ms. Lanre, just one small thing. The one who, it was Ms. Cynthia who introduced herself last, not me.
Yes, Ms. Cynthia, sorry about that. Yes, and then we move on to Mr. Tunji-Ajayi. Thank you.
Sorry, folks, I'm having a bit of internet difficulty, so I'm going to go off video, but hopefully you can hear me. Good morning, all. Delaney Hines, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm one of the recently joined board members for the board of directors at SCAGO. Really happy to be participating in this advocacy training this morning, and thankful that I have the opportunity to, share and enjoy this training with all of you. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hines. I also want to acknowledge people. I'm reading the chat. I'm seeing people joining us from Nigeria, Green Care Foundation, Sickle Cell Advocacy Group in Nigeria. We have people joining us from Uganda, Francis from Uganda, Africa, from Cameroon. It's really nice that we have patient organizations from all over the world joining in to tap into this training today. Thank you so much. We have Ashaka from Africa, all over the place. Thank you so much. Thank you. Without taking much more of your time, I will hand this over to Mira and Divan from Counsel Public Affairs. Thank you.
Hi there, everyone, and good morning. Thank you very much, Lanre, for inviting me to join yourself and your colleagues from advocacy organizations on behalf of individuals living with sickle cell and their families across Canada. And certainly welcome everybody on the webinar this morning where I am. But it's obviously a very different time for many of you folks. Wonderful to see folks coming to here from so many different countries in Africa, in the Caribbean, and elsewhere for those who may not have shared where they're coming from. And I think in discussing with Lanre about this presentation, I will admit that I was very cautious at first. Lanre, of course, can be very persuasive, which is an important thing to have in advocacy. But I was very cautious, of course, because I do not have the lived experience either as a family member or as an individual living with sickle cell that many of you have. But Lanre and I have worked together on a number of matters, so I have that familiarity, but also recognition that every province, state, country is going to have its own, not only its own system of government, but its own nuances in how it deals with issues and challenges, both officially and unofficially. So I, of course, am not an expert on wherever you live and the governments you are working with. I'm here in Ontario, Canada, the largest province or state of this country. Closing on 15 million people. So it's as big as many countries, but much smaller than others. So it has its unique considerations that I'm very familiar with. What we've tried to do here is to provide a presentation, a webinar that will have some universal principles that will be I believe, useful to you no matter where you are, no matter what point you're starting from. And then you can think about how to use these effectively in your own local context. So I want to just preface that first and foremost, because we want this to be useful to you no matter where you are in the world, no matter what the sort of state of your advocacy is today. And also we want to make sure that if you do have any questions as we go along, you take advantage of the chat box to add those questions. If they're sort of immediately relevant to the discussion as we're going through it, we'll be taking pauses throughout and we can address that. And if they're just good questions that we can look at the end, there's going to be some time at the conclusion too. So we can have a bit of a conversation. If things come up or if a question provokes another thought, we can raise that as well. So just by way of a little bit of background, my name is Devin Somerville. As noted, I'm with Counsel Public Affairs here in Toronto, Canada. I primarily do advocacy related to the Ontario government, so the state, the provincial government here in Canada. That is relevant particularly because, at least in a Canadian context, as the folks joining from not only Ontario but Nova Scotia and Saskatchewan, Manitoba will certainly be familiar with most of day-to-day funding and capacity decision making and process and insurance and everything in the health system is all handled at a provincial level here in Canada. That will differ, of course, in different countries. In other countries, it's much more federal. Some cases, it's even more decentralized, and it's more municipally or locally focused, district focused. It'll depend. So that's the context I come from. I had worked in government here in Ontario. I worked in the office of the Premier and then the office of a number of ministers. These here are elected officials who are appointed to ministerial portfolios by the Premier. And this will be a common concept, I think, for many folks from countries that use sort of a parliamentary type system. That's the kind of the way it's done in many countries. So I see folks who join from Jamaica, that there'll probably be some commonalities to how things are organized there that may differ from some folks in other countries. But, I worked as an employee, as a staff person, as what they call a political staffer. I was not a civil servant that had a job through the provincial government that persisted beyond elections. I was there really to serve the elected government of the day. And after that, came to join Counsel Public Affairs, where my focus has been on government relations, advocacy, lobbying. And that's really worked on behalf of a whole host of organizations. I've certainly done lobbying on behalf of big companies and organizations representing large business and commercial interests, resource interests, but also a lot of work on behalf of advocacy organizations representing patients and families and individuals living with a variety of health conditions or environmental groups. So I've really had the benefit of being able to work for the very big and the very small. And, I think there are universal principles for each. I'll perhaps start off by saying, before I share my screen, that there is often a perception that, at least I can speak to an Ontario context, there is a perception that big business, wealthy interests are inherently privileged in their ability to secure change through advocacy. And I would say that's true, at least in this country, at least only to the point that they have the money to be more persistent. They can hire the people to continue to make the case every day. They can go out and get the research they need. They can do the advertising. They can do all these things that help keep their message higher profile or more impactful. The one thing they can't easily do, of course, is they don't vote, not in the same way. And the advantage that grassroots advocacy has, despite its limitations that it does not have as much money, it does not have as much, et cetera, is the fact that it represents voters. It represents people that will go and vote for somebody who says they are going to do something, or vote against someone who fails to do something. So your energy and your time and effort, especially when it's well thought out, and it's collaborative, can match, in many cases, the efforts that these other interests can have in sometimes. And especially on an issue like this, when you're not really in conflict with those interests, it's about making an impression, maintaining that impression, and building those relationships with the right people that are going to be able to help you move your issue forward. And a recognition that it is easy to look at the totality of the problem and all of the issues and feel like, how can we possibly make a difference? It's so big. How can we make a difference? And I think what we'll talk about here today, and I know Lanre will speak to this as well, often by starting with smaller steps, you can build a foundation to make bigger changes. And you create a sense of investment in the change from the people who help bring it about. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I will not say we have a magic formula that's going to work in every context and work in every situation, but we have these general principles, as I said, that I think you will find will be very helpful. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and we have a little bit of a presentation here to share with you. Okay, and as shared with everyone, really what we're talking about here today is how to be an effective advocate. And beginning with just the question of what is government advocacy. And government advocacy is really, it's really an activity by an individual or a group that's aiming to influence decisions within a political institution. And, those can take on many different forms. You could be talking about advocating to secure government funding. You could be seeking to raise awareness about an issue, or you may be trying to prevent an action being taken by government that could have a negative effect on an issue of importance to yourself. Or you may be seeking something very specific, whether legislative, regulatory, or policy change that may ultimately, really define how the government manages issues of importance to you. And legislation, regulation, and policy are different things. We're not going to dive too deeply into those distinctions today because they are going to differ in every jurisdiction. But put simply, legislation are the laws. Regulations are the rules that those laws that are built under those rules. There's usually a power in a law that lets you set a regulation that can set rules. And a policy may just simply be the way that the government chooses to interpret those legislations or regulations into actual action. So what does effective advocacy entail? Really, a real key part to this would be that there are three elements that are important. You need to have a good case.
I'm sorry, Divan, sorry to pause you. There's a dog making noise in the background. Can everybody kindly mute their phone?
That would be my dog, unfortunately. And I'm going to see what I can do about that. But you'll just have to forgive me as I step away for a moment.
Sure, thank you.
Ms. Lanre?
Yes?
Whilst Divan steps away, I think I'm having issues with my video here. I don't think people could actually see me when I spoke, and I can't see myself either.
No, but we can definitely hear you.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, am I showing up on video? Because I just don't want to be distractive as I'm moving up and down, because I have no control whatsoever to see myself.
No, we are not seeing you.
Okay.
We are hearing you. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. If you can't see me, then that's good.
Thank you. I understand that. Yes.
Apologies about that. Hopefully that is better, and I will resume the presentation.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. So you really have three aspects of effective advocacy. You're going to need a good case. So first off, your ask has got to be grounded in good public policy that is backed up by facts and solid arguments. So ultimately, this is clearly and understandably a very emotional issue for many people. But at the end of the day, having those strong facts and solid arguments are going to be very important to moving this forward. Secondly, you're going to need a well-presented case, a clear message that's presented in a way that really can cut through all the other issues that are going to be affecting decision makers in government on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, a well-timed case. Timing does matter. When are you bringing this forward? Is it at a reasonable, is the ask reasonable to the time and place of government? For example, we were just going into an election here in Ontario that took place recently. Depending on the nature of the ask, that could be a very opportune time to bring something forward if it's politically resonant. If it's not, it could be a very poor time to bring it forward because everyone's distracted. They're anticipating a change in government or a potential change in government. They're thinking very politically. They may not see this as a time that they want to be dealing with an issue like that. So you could spend a lot of time and energy at a time when you're not going to be listened to. So you have to kind of think of the balance between all three of those things. A good, strong case that's well presented and it's well timed. So how do you then put your advocacy into action? First off, you have to define an ask. So the ask is basically what you want from government. And that could be a positive action, meaning an action in which you want the government to do something. It could be a negative action, which means you may not want them to undertake an action, or it could simply be about building a relationship going forward, which kind of is in between. But you really do need to know what you want before your advocacy is going to be particularly effective. And as we've shared, you have to maintain realistic expectations and embrace the fact that you're likely going to have to be incremental. You know, anyone we work with on any issue, knows what the perfect outcome would be. But if the outcome were easy, it would have already happened. So you have to be willing to embrace that thinking of this is where I want to get to, but where can I start from? And a well thought starting point could really build a foundation for moving that forward. And so when you're thinking about your ask, you really do need to find a top priority. It may not be the only thing you're going to work on. You may have other things you need to bring forward, but something that's really going to be the emphasis of your engagement, your advocacy. What's the context? And we've talked about this a little bit. That's going to matter about what's the nature of the government you're working with. What is the current fiscal situation if it's a financial ask? What is the current political dynamic here in Ontario and in many parliamentary systems? We have minority and majority governments. So that can be a very challenging situation in the sense that under a minority government, the government doesn't sort of have full control of the legislative process. So certain types of changes can be much more difficult than others. In a majority government, when they have a greater degree of control, they can make much more sweeping changes more easily should they choose to. So you need to know that underlying context. What's going on, both within the government and within things that are going to affect the government? And ultimately, who's your audience? Is this an ask that could be managed by career civil servants, bureaucrats? Is this about a day-to-day interaction that could be improved? Is your audience elected officials? And if it is elected officials, which elected officials? If it's about building broad relationships, it may be very different than if you're going to the minister or the head of a department or things of that nature that are going to be much more focused. So you're going to have to think through those different considerations. So that, in building on that thinking around who is your audience, who are the key players that are responsible to make or weigh in on the decision? And that's important. The weighing in is important because there's formal and informal impacts there. We know that a minister or a secretary or the premier or the governor or whomever may be the one that is the one making that decision. But who else is going to be shaping that? They all have senior staff, people who do a lot of the day-to-day work, even if it's their signature, you probably need to know who those people are and build a relationship with them. They're ultimately, a minister, for example, or a senior official is not necessarily going to make any decision without those advisors being well briefed and having thought about it and said to them, this is a responsible choice, or this choice is in our or your interest to do. It can also be other elected officials that may not have a direct responsibility, but they may be members of the same political party. They may have other abilities to influence that based on their geography or their issue connections. They may have a tangential relationship. They may not be responsible for matters of health, but maybe they're responsible for municipal issues or responsible for issues related to community services, for example. And there's a connection there of interest. And there may be personal interests as well. You may encounter, people of influence, elected or otherwise, that could be advocates because of their personal interest. These could be organizations, but they could be individuals as well. So you could be speaking to those types of folks, for example, an elected official who may have a personal connection to this, because they could be a champion for you to bring this issue forward to those key decision makers. They will help you navigate that exercise. And as I said, this sort of dynamic, this just kind of encaptures what I said. You've got these various audiences, from ministers and department leaders, your legislators, local elected officials, political influencers, bureaucratic staff, as well as non-governmental organizations, because sometimes this is about building a coalition of voices. And that's really at the heart of effective advocacy. As good as your argument is, as well thought out as it may be, as reasonable as your ask could be, successful advocacy is really going to be grounded in strong relationships and having a perspective that relationship development is a long-term and ongoing process. It is very easy to think, who is the person who can make the decision for me tomorrow? And that's where I need to spend all my time and energy. While losing sight of the fact that that person's authority could change. And then where are you? Or your ability to get to them quickly may be very limited, versus what it could be if you are meeting and building a relationship with a breadth of decision makers and influencers who one day may be in the position to make that change, or who could help you get to that point. By this not seeming just yourself going to a powerful individual who can make this decision and saying, change something, but rather him or her hearing it from a whole bunch of people with credibility and whom they respect. And thinking about these as long-term relationships, we've all seen, and it will certainly depend on the country, in some jurisdictions, governments at the political level rarely change. And who will be coming into a certain job will be sort of like, they'll do their time and build their credibility, and eventually they'll get that role. In other cases, they change constantly. Elections multiple times a year, every other year, they're always changing. So not only is there value in having a breadth of relationships, but also trying to make those connections at as many different points as you can within the bureaucracy. Are there people who work in departments of health or other relevant departments that are there regardless of who is in the government of the day, who are in charge in many cases of dealing with that day-to-day implementation of making things happen on the ground? Maybe they have a very good understanding of what you are dealing with on the ground in your communities. And they may have good insight on how something could be translated, so to speak, in a way that will resonate with those elected officials that they serve. So you want to think about not only having good relationships at the top, but good relationships throughout the structure. And that's going to take time. No one is going to say that this is something you can do overnight. You may spend 10 years to get to a point where you can say we have a pretty strong basis of relationships. But the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the second best time is today. So, that's kind of the principle that you have to take with it. It does seem daunting, but, that's really the philosophy you need to have for it. I think a lot of people also can get very intimidated at forming relationships. Feeling, who am I relative to these individuals that I see on the news or who have all this power and influence? I think it's important to remember, especially on an issue like this, that at the end of the day, and I don't want to seem simple-minded in the way I say this, but they are just people. And the worst that they probably can do is say no. So, you know, the personal risk of this kind of advocacy is low, and you know, the opportunity is high. So having that attitude of just continuous effort, knowing that some meetings you are going to have, and I'm sure Lanre and others here can speak to that from personal experience, are going to be a complete waste of time, and others will prove to be tremendously useful. And you may not always know going in which of those it's going to be. So having that continuous attitude is really important. And it's about building this network of support in terms of, it's not just the conversation between you or your organization and the government. It's the conversation between you and your organization and the government, as filtered in many cases through other allies you can build. Speaking specifically to sickle cell itself, patients and families are an obvious one. Not only are they, they have the personal experience, they have powerful stories that they can bring to the table here. They're not easily dismissed, but they vote, and that it shouldn't be lost on many as well. But also the physicians and other non-governmental organizations that have the on-the-ground experience to speak on behalf and can bring credibility to the asks you're bringing forward. In some cases, those may be other organizations representing individuals living with other conditions, other diseases, or related problems, related challenges that can help amplify this. And in some cases, is particularly on the issues related to health, you can find private sector companies that want to help. In some cases, companies that are producing therapeutics or other treatments have an interest in trying to move the issue of better care forward. Because, to be frank, for them, it creates a market. And, if it means that your families and the individuals who they love who are affected by this can get better care, it's an alignment of interest. And that's going to depend country by country and jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but it is a lever there that's been used very effectively many times in many different places. So I'll just pause there quickly in case there are any immediate questions, because I know I've already talked a fair bit before I continue.
Devin, one quick, sorry, go ahead, Christine. I was going to ask
I was just about to repeat your question, so go for it.
Perfect. I'm wondering if the slide deck you're sharing will be shared with the participants following today's presentation.
Yes, a great question, Delaney. We are going to be sharing a PDF of this presentation, so I would expect probably within the next week or so, it'll be something that can be shared.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Let's just take a quick check in the chat box. Any other questions right now? I don't see any so far.
Okay, well, not a problem. And again, if anything comes to mind, continue to use that. We'll be happy to chat at the end as well. Okay. So perhaps one of the most intimidating things that we encounter for many advocates is the idea of having that meeting is really frightening. Many cases you have passionate individuals and family members who can speak so forcefully about what they live with, what their family lives with, are very good at understanding the issue and what changes are needed and what your organization is pushing for. And the idea of approaching somebody for a meeting or a conversation is overwhelming. It's terrifying. It just seems so hard and so difficult. That can often be the hardest hurdle, to get somebody to do that for the first time. For many others, the getting and having the meeting isn't a problem, but they come away feeling that their meetings haven't been very useful. And in some cases, that's because of choices they've made in the meetings. I can speak from experience of being on the other end of those meetings and having had conversations with organizations and individuals with very compelling issues. And you sometimes will leave a meeting and say, you know, there's a very important issue that was brought forward here today, but I have no idea what I'm supposed to do about it. You know, that's almost one of the worst things you could have, to, you know, to get that opportunity to bring it forward and not effectively communicate what the purpose of the meeting is, or give that individual some sort of an action they can take, big or small, to help move things forward on behalf of what you're working on. So in terms of effective meetings, we've tried to provide a little bit of a step-by-step guide here to give you a sense of what you would need to do to sort of go from the beginning to the end of securing a meeting. This, of course, is predicated and prefaced by a sense that you've already defined that ask. You've determined that that thing that you want, or that you want to ask of that particular audience. You know who that audience is. You've identified the right person, but then you've gotten to that point of, okay, where do I go here now? So the first step is really scheduling and preparing for that meeting. And first and foremost, you need to have that clear ask, and then you need to have effective and useful briefing material. And that's really another matter, and that is going to depend on the nature of your issue. But typically speaking, short, clear, and to the point is almost always going to be best, because there's only so much time to focus and to review these issues. The other matter that to be aware of is if they are engaged and if there's a need for more information, that's always something you can provide later. And it's a great way to keep the conversation going. So don't feel that you need to get every piece of information to them in 30 minutes and overwhelm them, because they won't know what to do with it. So being clear and succinct is important. You want to send a formal meeting invitation to request a meeting. And that's going to depend on where you are. I think nowadays email is usually the preferred option, but in some places it may be over the phone. It may be sending a letter or putting in a more formal request. You know, you'll have to know what is the most logical thing to do in each place. And really try to be as accommodating as you can in terms of making yourself available to meet. We said candidate here, it could be any other official, for whatever length of time they have available. They're very busy. So if you can get 20 minutes on this particular day, you want to try to be as accommodating as you can to make that happen. And do expect that you're going to have to follow up on these requests. A lot of people will send in an invitation. They won't hear anything back. They'll get very discouraged. You just have to be persistent. We have to be persistent. And this is our job, to get these kind of meetings and to set these kind of conversations up. And we have to go back and forth again and again and again, many times with people we know well. It's just the nature of how busy things can get. Once you have a meeting that's scheduled, you want to make sure that you're sharing that briefing material, that they know the names and the titles of the people who are going to be participating. That's going to let them prepare a bit in advance and contribute to a better dialogue. And then make sure you refresh your own review and preparation for the meeting ahead of time. We said the toolkit here because in some cases we've developed toolkits in the past for use. There's not really something we can do here it's too broad. It's if you had a very specific issue that was universal everywhere, but you can create kind of a set of resources that you could be equipping your advocates with, for example. And then remember that local stories and examples are always going to strengthen your message. Bringing that personal or local context is going to be important. Otherwise, it can feel just like a very theoretical exercise. So in terms of creating those effective materials, your note, or as we call them, deck, which is really a presentation like we're seeing here today, they're going to set the narrative. I think that's a really important word, narrative, because at the end of the day, your briefing materials have to tell a story. They have to tell a story because that's what's going to register with someone who's hearing about this. It's going to be something they think about for the 15 to 30 minutes of that day, and then they'll have to think about a dozen other things. So what is that story that's going to help it register and stay with them? As I said before, be concise, do your homework. If you know how this individual, this audience could be helpful in your advocacy, Are they able to do an action for you? Are they able to share information? Are they able to help you connect with someone else? Do they have a personal connection that you're aware of? Find that out ahead of time so you can build that into your material, and then send it in advance as much as possible. They may not read it until you get into the meeting, but you give them that opportunity. And then some do's and don'ts. As we said, think about presenting your information like telling a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can put the end at the beginning, and that's not a problem. You can say the end, this is what we want, and then tell the story. That can be effective, because some individuals, they'll come into a meeting and they'll say, just tell me what you want. Okay, well, we're going to tell you what I want, but then we're going to work through the why. Try to anticipate the questions and issues that your audience may raise and proactively address them. If you can put the answers in your materials because you think they're going to ask you that, always a good idea to do it. That could be something about, what's this going to cost? How many people is this going to help? How long is it going to take? There'll be other more specific questions that may come up, but if you can anticipate some of them, trying to give the answer in advance will be helpful. Simplify. This is complex material. You have a wealth of understanding of sickle cell disease and all the ways that it manifests in day-to-day life. You understand the latest research. You really know this information, and they may know nothing other than maybe they've heard of the word. So you have to think about what is the information that they really need to know right now, and how can I present that in the most simple way possible? And then don't assume, as I said, don't assume that they're knowledgeable about what you're talking about. They most likely will never have as much knowledge about this as you do. But you need to think about, if I'm talking to someone who lacks this understanding, how can I start from a place of helping them to understand without being patronizing or being, silly about it? But if I was talking with somebody who's educated but uninformed, where would I start? And so that's what I think you want to be thinking about when you put your materials together. And then step 2 is conducting that meeting. So you're in the room with this official at the time that was scheduled. They've looked at your briefing note. They're here to hear from you. So what should you think about in terms of how to be effective there? First off, stick to the point. So many meetings that I have been a part of have suffered from the fact that the person there is meandering all over the place. They are talking about so many different aspects of the issue that I would struggle to understand what their objective from the meeting is. And that's very important. Why am I there? And stick to that point. And from the same order, be concise about that. Do your homework as well about, why would they want to help us with our ask? What is in it for them? You don't need to be crass about it. Oh, we'll deliver this many voters to you if you do X, but you can speak to what they want to do. Did the government run on a commitment of some sort about improving healthcare for a certain community or in a certain way? Can you speak to how your ask is going to help do that? Can you show how helping you will help them or help the issues they care about? Give examples, find those local angles. Both of those are really linked. Make this a human and a relatable issue if it's not something they're dealing with day to day. Help them understand what it means in a local context. Don't fake an answer. It's tempting to be an expert in a meeting and you'll get a question that may be very unexpected. It's absolutely fine from my perspective to say, I don't know the answer to that, but always use it as an opportunity to say, but I would love to follow up with you when I have an opportunity to get some more information on that or to confirm some of the details for you. At the end of the day, it's about building a long-term relationship. So having a reason to go back is never a bad thing. Take notes. Make sure you understand if they give you recommendations or advice or ask those questions, that you have a bit of a record of what was discussed that you can refer back to, and make sure to leave your materials behind. You sent them in advance, but if you have a hard copy, bring it with you, leave one with them. It never hurts to have another copy lying around. And then when we talk about the conversation, I think this is really reiterating it. 3 themes that are really key if you're just trying to get 3 pieces of information across, it's very specific local experience or personal experience. What's the absolutely relevant context to the ask you are making? There, as you all well know, there are conferences and seminars held on this issue around the world that go on for days, that experts have panels and talk, and they talk for days about this. There are people who do this work every day and could speak about it and do speak about it every day. So there's no lack of things to say. The key is, what context does that audience member really need to know for my ask to make sense to them and why there's a need for action. And then step 3 is really following up after the meeting. Keep the dialogue going, stay in touch. There's so many times people will have that one meeting, feel very positive about it, and then they'll say, but nothing happened. Well, of course nothing happened. You had one good introductory meeting and never talked to them again, and not surprisingly, other issues dominated their priorities. So being persistent is really important, but also be thankful. Really appreciate the fact they took this time. People are always going to want to help people who are thankful for the help that's being given to them. Take the opportunity to follow up with them with a thank you email. Remind them of the key points that were raised. And then find those opportunities to reconnect. And that could be even referenced in the thank you email. I will be following up with information about the questions you asked, or, I will follow up after I speak with such and such who you recommended I reach out to update you on that discussion. I will connect with you again in the months ahead to tell you about how we are doing on X, finding those reasons to reconnect, and then doing so. So with that, again, I'll pause there because at this point in time, we'll be passing it back over to Lanre to speak a little bit about just one example of how in Ontario, some of these matters were put into practical terms. But I'll pause there in case there's any questions.
We do have a couple of questions. The first question was if this recording will be posted. I believe, Lanre, you can jump in if otherwise, but I believe we'll be posting it on our SCAGO website in the coming days. We can definitely alert you via email once it is posted as well. And then the next question is, will there be a certificate of participation offered for the session? Lanre, do you have an answer to that?
So we were not planning to offer a certificate of participation. However, we can, for those that might need it, well, we can look into that certainly. Christina, if you want to put in your email address there for them to get in touch with us, for those who might need a certificate of participation, and we look into that for them. Thank you.
And let me just check once again to see if there's any other questions.
I think Delaney, he's raising
yes.
her hand, so.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity. Devin, I have 2 questions, to be honest. The first was kind of circling back to your point about who's your audience. With respect to tactics to get other folks of influence who aren't at the top, do you have anything you could suggest about how to go about doing that? Because obviously, if you're making a cold connection, I think instinctively you'll think, okay, let me reach out to the person who has executive decision-making power. But then how do you reach out to the other folks who might have influence?
So I won't get into too much detail here because I think Lanre will give some good specifics of an example in case you're in Ontario. But for example, you think about elected officials, at least in the Ontario context here, and it's going to be similar in many places. We have a party that currently forms government. We have parties in opposition. They have elected officials that represent, at least in the Ontario context here, they represent geography. So you can start to think about, who are my elected officials and representatives? Are they members of the government party, for example? I have a local relationship there. Maybe I already know them. Maybe I don't, but I have a reason for them to get to know me because I am a local voter in their community representing an issue of importance. It could be, for example, a bureaucratic official, a career official, but they work on this issue and you have something of merit to talk about this. You represent a community affected by this. They should have a professional interest in meeting with you and understanding. And if you present your materials and you're asked effectively in that introduction, they should want to. In other cases, you may be advised, so it may be that the relationships you build could be your way of introduction to those other individuals, because your local elected official, for example, or it may be your local mayor, who knows, it could depend on the jurisdiction. They may say, you need to talk to this person or such and such, the minister's senior staff person. They're very smart. I know them well. You should go talk to them. I'll help you make an introduction or use my name, things like that. It could be informal, but you should always be thinking about who should I be talking to next, even if they're not the person that is going to be making that, as you said, executive decision. Who's someone else that I should talk to? Because you never know which way it'll turn it over. And as I've just shared, there's a lot of different ways that you could find those connections and champions and open that door.
Awesome. And then last question, in terms of when we're presenting the ask, what's the right balance between or distinguishing between background and rationale versus the ask? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I think the ask should usually be to the point and specific. You can sometimes come up with an ask that seems very, very broad, but you're doing it on purpose. For example, you could say something like, our ask is to bring together, representatives of organizations, representing people living with sickle cell disease to develop a strategy. And that's very broad in general. So, but your intention there is, we don't think we can secure a very specific result right now, or there's disagreement. So what we want the government to do is to say, we've decided this is a priority, and so we're going to bring people together to talk more about it. And then we'll figure out what we can do. But in other cases, you might have a much more specific ask. I need you to do X or Y. It may be very specific. It may be, in this community, we need a public health worker to help this. Or it may be, we need X millions of dollars to provide this across the state or across the country or wherever. In terms of that balance then between background context and the ask, I think the ask should be very short and very precise to whatever exactly you need. And then I think your thinking around background is, how much information do they need to understand this? And I think that does kind of fall back to the who, what, where, when, why principle. Answer those questions. The why being very important. Why is it needed? And why should action be of interest to them? And you want to be careful. Sometimes you may look at it and say, there's a very political reason why this will be of interest, but you may not want to say that in your written materials. Right. You may just want to think about, how can I say, hey, this works in both of our interests, or the interests that you are ostensibly working towards. And then I do think with an issue like sickle cell disease, it is important to share the what is sickle cell, but you want to do it in as simple a way as possible. And I think your emphasis has to be on, what does it mean for people who live with it? What does it mean for their ability to live a normal life, to have a normal job, for the burden that's put on their families? What does it mean for the costs that the government has to bear to help care for them because they're not getting better care up front, for example? And just try to put that succinctly so they understand. You could overwhelm them with the science, where you want to just give it very simply. But what does the science mean? What does it mean for somebody, how they live? How does it impact how they live? And then what does that mean for how they can participate in their society? And I think you want to kind of come up with a way to say that pretty simply.
Thanks, Devin.
Thank you, Devin. And I want to thank everybody again for being part of this training session today. And please, we ask that you complete the poll to help us know what we can do better and what else you would like to know more of that we can bring in training. So even though I'm going to be giving SCAGO as a case example, I'm also going to be touching on other regions as well, just to kind of make sure that's more relevant to everybody on this training session today. So as Devon has clearly put it, you have to definitely understand what is your need. What is your need? And for many organizations, especially groups who doesn't have money to do a lot of work, or groups in Africa, or even here in Canada, we are still struggling to some degree, even, groups in South America, in the Caribbean, any part of the world, you find that when it comes to sickle cell disease, there are a lot of needs. There are a lot of needs. However, as Devon pointed, you have to focus on an ask, and that's what we do at SCAGO. You have to understand, I can't go in with 5 different things. It might be difficult for them to get those approved, but if I go in with one doable thing, one thing that is doable, most likely I'll be successful. So let's go with one thing, one ask. So just by introduction, I'd like to first introduce the Sickle Cell Awareness Group of Ontario. We are a not-for-profit charitable organization registered in the province of Ontario, serving families with children, adolescents, and adults with sickle cell disease, right? Part of what we do, we engage in psychosocial and clinical research. We support health promotion. We support patient and healthcare providers' education. Community awareness is a big part of what we do, which I know many of the groups on this call also do. And we engage in developing best practices and also promoting best practices, both for the patient community and the physician community as well. Now, since COVID-19, we have moved on to also engage in global initiatives to support global patient organizations, such as what we're doing now in their families that they do serve. One thing that is very common with many groups, including SCAGO on this call today, is that many of the sickle cell organizations across the world started because there's a personal story. So with SCAGO, we started in 2005 due to the loss of my own brother, Sunday Hafalabi, to the complications of sickle cell disease. I know many people have a story, it's either their daughter, their child, their sibling like myself, or they themselves have, stories around sickle cell disease, why they are doing what they're doing. However, personal reasons and passion alone could not get you to achieve success when it comes to advocacy. You have to be equipped with advocacy best practices. That's very important. And so for SCAGO as an organization, some of what we do in order to ensure that we are able to impact our community effectively is to brush up on our advocacy skill sets, right? Today, I'm going to share 2 successes that we've achieved and what we do to achieve those successes, and maybe there are lessons that others can also learn from this, right? But before I go there, I want to talk about places like in Africa. You are very, I don't want to use the word lucky, but because sickle cell is more rampant in those parts of the world, there is so much that you can do. In Canada here, sickle cell disease is rare. And that also poses some challenges, right? Because if it's rare, again, when you think about politics and voting, why elected officials sometimes wants to support an issue, it's also votes, right? But if it's very, very minor or very little number of the community that has been affected, then there's another issue there. But in many parts of the world where there are a lot of people living with sickle cell disease, you have an excellent ammunition really to really improve, the impact that your organizations have in advancing advocacy in those parts of the world. Now, for instance, in Nigeria, I'm going to go to Nigeria. In Nigeria, a lot of the bills that I know that are being introduced in Nigeria are more around bills like government should legislate individuals with sickle cell disease not to marry each other. Like, I'm not sure if that's where we need to put focus. What about preventative bills, newborn screening bills, those kind of bills that will really impact, you know, the community positively? Education around who people should marry or not marry can be done, but I don't think that's appropriate for a bill to be passing as law who somebody loves or they marry. So I think we also have to look at what kind of bills we are asking government to pass and so on and so forth. Now, to go back to SCAGO, I'm going to talk about the Bill 255, which was introduced in 2021 last year and passed also just within 3 months of introduction. It was passed. And also I'm going to talk about the recent funding of the Ministry of Health, you know, for staffing for some of our centers of excellence. And I'm going to talk about this because I really want all to really learn about, you know, the successes. These 2 successes, the very most recent, all within the last 1 year, and how we achieve it and what others can learn from it. Number one, we have to build the case, right? So in building the case, right, definitely you need to understand who can help you, who can support you, who can support what you're looking for. For us in SCAGO, I'm going to tell you, since 2012, we've been introducing bills, not successful. You know why? Part of the reasons is because we were asking the opposition parties to introduce bills for us. And that was a major failure. Opposition party could help you raise awareness if you're not getting the necessary attention that you need from the government of the day, but it'll be very difficult for them to get your bill passed. And that's what we've been doing, because it was easier for us to work with some people, and then we would like just work with them over the years, but then we said, stop, what are we doing wrong? And then we learned that really to be successful, you have to work with the government of the day in getting a bill passed. Number 2, you have to understand what is it to be introduced as a bill in the legislature, or what should I be working with the bureaucrats on? That's a difference, and you need to understand that. I did some research and I found that the kind of bills that actually get passed are mostly the good feel, what they call the good feel bills, historic day, awareness day, those kind of stuff. You might call them low-hanging fruit bills, but at the same time, they help to raise awareness and get your foot in the door. It takes you from nobody knowing about your cause and you struggling to you knowing, to you getting in there and elected officials debating on your cause. You get the awareness, you start there. Once you get your feet in, you can then say, next step is the next need. Now they've known you. You've raised awareness. Now they're compassionate about your cause. Now they want to help you. You can't start asking them for millions of dollars or naira or whatever money you spend in your country. You start with something that is not even going to cost them money to get them to listen to you. When they listen to you, then you can move on with things that would then cost money. And that's what we did at SCAGO. We started with the Bill 255. It's not costing nobody any money, but it's helping them to understand and know what sickle cell disease is, who it affects, right? How it affects them. And these people are your constituents. We asked our members to talk to their elected officials and tell them, I'm in your constituency. And this is what I go through. This is my issue. How are you going to help? And we got every member voted yes for this bill. In the history of bill passing in this country, this is the first bill that passed the fastest within 3 months of introducing it. But what did we do? Now we are familiar with the elected officials, with the ministry. They know us by now. Now we launch. How do we get there? We form relationships. Number one, I wanted to say that you cannot be intimidated by the Ministry of Health officials. In every country where you are serving, know those who are working in your Ministry of Health. You got to work with them. You also must know who are your elected officials, and you must be non-partisan, please. You can't say, I'm a liberal, I have to work with the liberal officials, or I'm a conservative. For me, I belong to no party and all party. I work with everybody because all you care about is getting your ask done. That's what you care about, that's your goal. And if you're working with everyone, then more people will support and have a better understanding of your ask. What did we do? And one thing I'm going to say also, not only are the Ministry of Health officials important in a disease area, if you're serving a disease area like sickle cell disease or any other disease that you're working in, you have to work with the healthcare providers. They have the technical know-how. You cannot do advocacy without the healthcare providers. You work together hand in hand. Because when you go to those Ministry of Health meetings, when you meet with the elected officials, you go together. You go together. So you form that partnership. It's very important. And you also look at, which are the elected officials with political will? Again, I'm going back to Caribbean, to Africa, where you have sickle cell more rampant in those parts of the world, to say, you will definitely find some politicians that have history or story around sickle cell disease. Find them, do your research, and use them. Use them. I'm not gonna be apologetic when I say use them, because they have that story around the disease. They're more likely to want to help and push it forward. I don't know if anybody knows this. The current president of Nigeria, his daughter died a few years ago because of complications of sickle cell when giving birth. You have these political ammunitions that you can use them. You identify yourselves with those that have interest in your story, but of course with everybody else. In the case of SCAGO, I live a little bit up north in the city of Berry, and my elected official MPP does not have story around sickle cell, but guess what? You still representing me, so I'm coming to you anyways. So I went to her in 2018 and I said, I'm here from Sickle Cell Awareness Group of Ontario. I live here in your constituency. I'm representing individuals and families with sickle cell disease. She said, what is sickle cell disease? She had no clue. She had no clue where I'm coming from. What is the issue? And in 2018, I said, we'd like to have you introduce for us a bill, Sickle Cell Awareness Day bill. She said, oh, well, I have another bill that I'm already introducing. And of course, she doesn't even know what sickle cell disease is. So I know I have a lot of work to do with her. And so I didn't get discouraged. Like Devil said, be persistent. I did not get discouraged, but I was looking which MPP doesn't have a bill. But that's again another lesson that we learned. An MPP or MP or any government official in their member of parliament can only debate one bill at a time. So sometimes the politicians kind of pull this thing over us, and they have these 8-9 bills from different organizations, and they're introducing this bill, and we are happy they're supporting us. But is the bill going to see the light of the day? No. Most likely, no. They can only be pregnant and give birth to one bill at a time. But sometimes they're pregnant with 8 bills, but they can only birth one at a time. So I was looking for that member of provincial parliament that doesn't have any other bill at hand that can really take my bill seriously and make it pass. So when Andrew said, I have another bill, I understand. And I said, thank you very much. And I was looking around, and everybody has a bill. Nobody can help me. Until 2021, when we went back to Andrea again, she said, yes, my bill has passed. Now I can do your bill. We went back. We didn't say we're not going back to her. We went back. And she, along with Rugi Jalloh, introduced her bill and we got it passed. And that was very helpful, for us, right? Also, when we talk about forming relationship, SCAGO understands that. We have relationship with both organizations in the sickle cell community. As you can see on the forum today, we have so many. We work with Thalassemia Foundation. We also work with hemophilia, because hemophilia, thalassemia, sickle cell, we have blood disorders, and most of the time we are still in the same clinic by the same clinicians, and so you must work together. We find that hemophilia also has done many things that we've not done in sickle cell, and that relationship is very important for us to see what they've done, how they've done it, and they're very always willing to share. Now, Thalassemia Foundation of Canada and SCAGO, we have done so many work together. Even in 2010, we tried to introduce a national bill together, Bill C-605, introduced by MP Kirsten Duncan. But soon after we introduced the bill, we also realized that SCAGO is provincial and could not really push at the national level. And the bill was then just not having any traction. It wasn't moving forward. So that kind of also led to us calling all national advocates together, Ms. Rugi and all the other national advocates, to say, let's come together and form a national organization, because we need that national front to do advocacy at the national level. And that gave birth to Sickle Cell Disease Association of Canada. And as an association, as a national association, the SCDAC then was able to introduce Bill S-211, whereby we were able to introduce the first sickle cell bill at the national level, of course, in Canada, to pass as law. So again, you have to understand, again, your jurisdiction, what you can do, what you cannot do, and that's what we learned with that. I also want to mention that we were able to achieve success in all of these things that we did. Number one, because not only did we work, within sickle cell, but also we work with other organizations like Thalassemia Foundation. So the Bill 255 that was that we introduced in Ontario, it was done in collaboration with the Thalassemia Foundation, and it passed through law, introduced in March and passed through law in June. They was expedited, amazing. Now, one thing I also want to ask is to also mention is that because we got this bill introduced, we built on that success. What did we do? In 2021, right after we got the bill passed, we went to the ministry. We did not do it as a bill. We went to the Ministry of Health, because we've already been building that relationship also with our Ministry of Health, and we say, we have 7 centers of excellence in this province that both see thalassemia and sickle cell disease. 5 of them are struggling with staff needs. And what we've done, because again, with the Thalassemia Foundation, we established what we called Ontario Hemoglobinopathy Patients Association. We walked through that front, right? We walked through that front and we presented this need to say, Ontario Centers of Excellence need staffing. We need it. And so we work with them, with the centers. What do you need in what area? Some need more nursing needs, some need social worker need, whatever your needs are. We put it together and we presented it to the ministry. And we also asked, as part of the advocacy exercise, for the hospitals to also, their senior administrators to also send letters to say they truly need this. And the ministry earlier this year approved all the centers that we presented for funding. So again, what am I saying here? You need to understand, you could have gone and said, okay, we're doing a bill to get staffing. No, you don't need to do a bill on that. That you can just do with your ministry. Some things you can just work with the bureaucrats and you achieve success doing it. You have to bear in mind, introducing a bill means that, you know, like for instance, in the province of Ontario, every term is about 4 years for the elected officials. Once the 4 years is over, then all bills that have not been passed, you have to start all over again when the new government gets in. So sometimes some things that you can achieve at the ministry level, you don't have to worry about them as a bill, right? So what am I saying here? In a nutshell, achieving success means working with other people, your healthcare providers, your other organizations in your area. Sometimes you might do cross-disease collaboration like we do with thalassemia and hemophilia. It's very important. And also, you also have to understand that you have to work, you know, with different people at different levels, right? That will help you to achieve success in your advocacy. And then persistency, like Devon said earlier, you can't say because they're not answering your phone calls, so they're not meeting with you, they're not giving you that meeting appointment, you're going to give up. Don't give up. I understand the different dynamics in different parts of the world. I know in many developing parts of the world, it's very difficult to even get to have meetings with elected officials, but you cannot get discouraged. You know, you work also with their staff, like Devon was saying, and they can help you get those meetings that you do need. Now, I don't know if there are any specific questions before we go to the next slide. Otherwise, we can take questions after we finish.
Yes, we do have one question. I think Delaney just jumped in to answer it, but I'll just share it here. And it's from Riley. She's with Saskatchewan, and she's a medical student. And she said, thank you for this wonderful presentation. And she was wondering if any of the panelists has experience with advocating to policymakers in healthcare systems. And she said, we are interested in advocating to improve our emergency care for our sickle cell patients. And let's see, and families in the provincial healthcare system. For example, this could look like introducing better protocols to streamline care when patients come in with sickle cell emergencies. Part of the issue is lack of education, and we're also working on this. How do you collaborate with policymakers in healthcare? Is her question.
I'm gonna answer that based on SCAGO experience that we've done in that area. So, so again, like I mentioned, with us introducing that bill has also gained us some popularity with both in the ministry and also, you know, with the elected officials. Now, what you're looking for is more in the ministry level. What I would recommend and what SCAGO has done in similar matters is we have, to be honest with you, we have ongoing standing meetings with Ministry of Health officials. So in your province, in Saskatchewan, for instance, you would look at in your ministry, which department is under maybe sickle cell will fall under maybe acute program, or it might be placed under a different program. Look at other what program is placed under in your ministry, and seek meeting with that department, right? Get to start to engage them to say you are their partner, right? Sickle cell is part of their portfolio, and you wanted to know how you can work together, and then you present the need, right? In terms of we need to have better protocol for emergency and so on and so forth, right? I tell you, part of SCAGO doing that, getting comfortable and having, standing meetings with our Ministry of Health, help us to be invited to what we call the Black Health Summit table, where we were pushing sickle cell disease on this table. And that's one of the reasons that led to the ministry now putting together a standing committee called Quality Standard Committee, looking at the standard of care provided to sickle cell patients in the province, right? So, but what I'm saying again is you cannot do this alone. You work with your healthcare providers, you form relationship with them, and you can do these meetings together with them because they'll be providing the technical know-hows and helping you to draft documents that you can also draft and present it to the policymakers, right? So it's you finding in the Ministry of Health which department handles issues like sickle cell disease and start with engaging them. So
and I agree with everything Lanre said there, and I think that's almost the necessary place to start on an issue like that. And once you've done that, I think you have opportunities that you can use to sort of broaden and elevate this politically, but in a way that would help with those interactions. For example, you could look at, and being Saskatchewan, you could look at the government party, which I know is the Saskatchewan party, and are there Saskatchewan party members representing particularly districts in the cities of Regina and Saskatoon, and go to them to talk about this issue, but don't go to them and give them a very technical solution. The Ministry of Health officials will understand that. You could talk about something like presenting the problem and talking about something like a sickle cell patients' Bill of Rights or something like that, something that has a bit more of a political nuance to it. That might say to them, that makes a lot of sense to me. That's an issue I'd want to talk about or to get involved with. That you could, as Lanre said, get engaged with organizations representing the needs and interests of the broader, African Canadian, Black Canadian community in those cities, for example, to bring this forward as saying this is an issue that really matters to our community. This is a place where things are falling short. It'll all about figuring out that balance, but the net effect of that would be, as Lanre says, it might not be a legislation solution, a law being passed, a bill being passed, but rather it gets an elected official to start talking with the ministry to say, we need to do something about this. What could we do? And what about this idea? And then that helps your conversations that you've been having with the Ministry of Health. It helps give them the signal that there's political will to make a change or interest to make a change.
Thank you, Devon. And to add to what Devon was saying, let's use that Bill of Rights bill for sickle cell. Let's use the sickle cell Bill of Rights example as an example. So I wanted to say that you have constituents that lives all over, that province. In addition to getting, again, working, with the ministry, getting those constituents engaged with their own MLA. Some people call them MLA. We call it MPP. Getting them engaged, or if at the federal level, your MP or whatever you call your members, and get them to start to make meetings with them to say, this is the need, this is what we need, and we live in your constituency. And I think that will also help to improve, on what you're doing. And then you let those MLAs understand what you're doing with the ministry so that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, and then asking them how they can support to push this forward and get this to be, because your goal is to be successful. It's not to do the exercise, no, but to get success at the end of it. And you keep looking at how do we achieve success? How do we achieve success? And who do we need to engage? So achieving success, that's part of, getting those MLAs involved or MPPs. Any other question we can take at this time?
Ethan, I just want to mention, Ethan and Fema, we haven't missed your questions, but I did address it in the chat box. I believe those are more medical related questions about cures and medications. Great questions, but I believe they're beyond the scope of this presentation. But I did share a link with you back to our SCAGO website for patients and caregiver information and resources. And then let me just see really quickly. I think I have one here from Ashaka. Sorry if I mispronounced her name. She says she's introduced herself, and she said that she's from Nigeria. And is it possible for all government and non-government sickle cell organizations to come together as one and actually learn from international sickle cell organizations about what they're doing right or wrong as to regards to advocating right issues to be addressed by our government regarding bills passed? and she really wants to bring the right change to her country. And she's asking if it's possible and if it could, how she can approach that to be effective.
Oh, wow. It's amazing, Ashika. I'm really pleased to be, I'm really pleased that we have you on this call. I myself have joined a few sessions. I've been invited to speak at some of the, sessions done in Nigeria and other parts of the world. And in one of my past roles as the President and CEO of the Global Alliance of Sickle Cell Disease Organizations, I've met Dr. Alayo Shokwekan from Nigeria. I know you're from Nigeria, so this is why I'm talking about Nigeria. I've met with him. He's the Deputy Director, at Federal Ministry of Health in Abuja. And at that time, I was speaking with him about how we could improve the outcome of individuals living with sickle cell disease in Nigeria. I think that's a very good possibility for groups in Nigeria and other parts of the world to really come together. So there are organizations as the GASDO, the Global Alliance, that you can all work with. And also in a country as big as Nigeria, I know there is no true national organization. There's the Sickle Cell Foundation of Nigeria. There's also the Sickle Cell Society of Nigeria, but there is no true national organization. I think the first step, which I have advised Nigeria so many times, the first step is to come together in the country as a truly one national organization. And I think by coming truly together as a national organization, you'll be able to tackle a lot of issues together as an organization. But again, I know it's a bit challenging, but it's something that is doable. And I can have a conversation with you outside of this meeting, but yet there are things that can be done to improve, because I think fragmentation is also a problem. When there is fragmentation, and this group goes to the government, and that group goes to the government, and that group goes to government, sometimes they tend to ignore all groups, because they're saying everybody are coming with different things, and which one are we going to really do? And they just tend to, ignore. But if you go with one voice and you approach the government together as one united voice, you get a lot more done, and there'll be more success doing that. But I do understand there's a lot of fragmentation in sickle cell. It's all over the world, but we can slowly, move and get over that with time. Any other question before I take the last slide here?
I believe that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christina. So we wanted to better understand how this session has helped you. So we're asking that each one of you from your organizations engage in an advocacy project. I want you to engage in an advocacy. It could be anything that so first of all, we want you to think about what are your needs, and pick one that is not going to be overwhelming. Just pick a simple one that you think will also get you through the door easier and quicker. Pick that project. It could be as simple as asking, like we did in SCAGO, Sickle Cell Awareness Day. Something simple that's not costing your elected officials any money, but it will score them some political points too. Pick a project. It could be a Bill of Rights, as Devan was suggesting. Anything that you feel is needed to raise awareness, get you in the door, and it's still advocacy in nature, pick it. We want you to start that journey. And if you have any issues, any questions, you feel free to email me at SCAGO. I will help you. I will mentor you. I will guide you through the course of the advocacy project. Okay, we will support you. And we would like you to present that project next year when we host this training again. As a matter of fact, we might, it's not written down right here. We might be able to provide some sort of gift or some sort of monetary compensation to one or two organizations that most successful in their projects. Listen, however, we want you to get your feet wet. Start with advocacy initiative. Do something, and we see what we can help you to achieve. I saw in the chat, Cynthia is asking if that mentorship will be at a cost. At this point, I will volunteer my time to, to help you to some degree. So mostly it will not be at a cost. It depends, but we can talk on each of the initiatives. So each initiative that you are embarking on it will depend on what you're trying to do and what we can support you with. If we cannot support you, we can recommend firms that can also support your project. But we want you to start something. Don't think that you are alone, because you are not alone. We are here to guide you and help you with this initiative. Somebody's mic is making noise. Somebody's saying that they're not hearing. Sorry, can we unmute if we're not speaking? So this is where we are at this point. Is there any other questions or that we need to take? Thank you.
I don't see any others right now, Lanre.
Okay. All right. So we have Devon, you have anything to say to those? Anyone has any other comments to make before we do the closing remarks?
Oh, sorry, I think we have one here. I just missed it. Talking about a national organization, does SCAGO have plans of kickstarting it with her partner organizations in Nigeria?
No, unfortunately, SCAGO does not have the mandate to do our sickle cell organization in Nigeria. However, we do work with a lot of groups in Nigeria, and we've been talking to a lot of groups, encouraging the groups in Nigeria to really come together as a national group. I think the groups in Nigeria are the best ones to do it. But yes, if there are ways that we can support, from our best practices, what we've learned over the years to support you in this journey. Because again, Ms. Rugi is on this panel. When we started the Sickle Cell Association of Canada, it was similar to Nigerian story, because all the groups that were there were non-national. But one day we woke up and we said, there must be a national group in the country. And we did it, right? We did it. So I know Nigeria and the other countries can do it. It's just a matter of coming together and look at the common interests. I understand some of the challenges could be, because I know when we're trying to do this in Canada, some of the comments were, I've started my group for 30 years or 20 years. I don't want to lose my name and what I've done. And we had all of those sentiments, which are very valid sentiments. But I just wanted to say that when you give people the reason why they need to be part of, why they need to do it, it's for the common goal where we can all benefit and we can go with one unified voice to the government. I think many people will want to join in. So be it in Nigeria or Uganda, Kenya, Jamaica, everywhere, let's try to have those unified voices, and also one thing I'm going to say here, I know it's outside of the scope, Christina, don't be upset with me, but I am going to say that don't think that because you are volunteers, you have to continue to just volunteer. Sickle cell advocacy work, working in a patient organization takes a lot of hours and time. It's a full-time job. And I can tell you, I myself spend an average of 10 to 12 hours sometimes a day just on sickle cell. So I had to leave my day job and just focus on this. But I can afford to do that because I own my own business and other people are doing it. But I want to just mention that if you can get funding and seek funding, please, to get staff. That is one thing that is missing in many sickle cell organizations. It's all volunteers. And guess what happens? Volunteers only work when they have the time. And so we are not efficient in what we're doing. SCAGO has moved from there. Now we have workers, we have staff, we have contractors, and I'm encouraging every sickle cell organization, spend time also getting funding to advance what you're doing. You'll be able to have people with the right knowledge, right skill set to advance what you're doing. And it would just be because my daughter has sickle cell is why I'm doing it, but I don't even have the skill set. You want to do it, you are doing it, and you have the right people on your team to help you. You can also engage consultancy firms to help you. These are skills that will help you to advance what you're doing. It's very important. Thank you. And without taking much more of your time, I want to thank everyone again for being on this call, our board members, Ms. Doreen, Mr. Delaney, and many of the board members onto this call. Before we go, Beverly has joined us. Beverly, you want to quickly introduce yourself and your organization in 1 minute, and then we'll round up.
Then I would just, once Beverly finishes, can I have a minute? I really need to share something that I think people can benefit from. Okay, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for being late. My name is Beverly Njuku. I am the founder and president of the Sickle Circle of Manitoba. We are a grassroots organization looking to advocate for people living with sickle cell disease in Manitoba. And this year, we just feel like we've gained a lot of traction, and we just hope to keep going that way.
Thank you, Beverly. Nice to see you. Ms. Rugi.
I also want to say just thank you for this session. It's been extremely informative. So I'm sad for what I missed, and I'm hoping that there's going to be a recording.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Lanre and Devon, for the presentations. It's really helpful. Just something I want to share in terms of advocacy. And Lanre, as you mentioned, advocacy always doesn't mean requesting for a bill or wanting a bill or something big. In Nova Scotia, for Atlantic provinces, we wanted to advocate for, or we advocated for an adult clinic. And what we did, we collaborated with the Thalassemia Group of Thalassemia Foundation of Canada, with RIA. So what we wanted to have a stable clinic that patient can go there maybe 3 times a month. We didn't get that. We had a meeting with hematology, adult hematology. We realized that there are challenges, some of the things we even didn't know. Their staff is small, we need staffing, they don't have money, we have to go through the province. Last year for sickle cell awareness, you were part of that, Lanre, our presentation was around that we have government officials. We cannot push buttons, we wrote letters, we didn't get any responses. Then there was work going on in the background that we even didn't know of. We just got the information a couple of months ago that QE2, Queen Elizabeth II Hospital, which is the adult hospital, the hematology department, what they did, they actually have a space now for people with sickle cell disease adult. When they go to emergency, they take them there. So although it's not like a full-blown clinic, but when you go to emergency now with sickle cell disease as an adult, you go there and there's always a nurse there that specializes in sickle cell disease. And then there's a doctor on call. So why I am bringing that up is that sometimes you aspire for one thing and you really may not get that, but you may get something else. Now that there's this space, depending on the numbers, we may even push further and have a more established clinic. Anyway, I just thought it's important to share that. And because our numbers are small in Nova Scotia, that's why we brought in the other provinces to boost up our numbers. So I think that would be, hopefully that's helpful.
Ms. Rugi, I wanted to congratulate you and your team. You've done amazing work in that area. Thank you so much for sharing that, success story. And as Ms. Rugi, said, you might not get the full length of what you're looking for, but you get something that's a start, but doesn't mean you stop too. You keep pushing. We did get newborn screening in Nova Scotia also, done a few years ago. 2015, we got that to happen in Nova Scotia. So you've been doing amazing work in that province, and thank you and congratulations again. So I think all other organizations on this forum today, we're challenging you. As I said earlier, start if you're doing something currently, Let us know what you're doing. If you don't have any advocacy project, engage in something, and we will help you along the way as much as we can. But you make sure you start something, and let's get advocacy going for sickle cell disease.